The Arctic wilderness is a place of white silence, a land where the wind is the only voice you hear for hundreds of miles. It is a world of absolute zero, where survival is not a right, but a daily, exhausting battle against the elements. In the winter of 1930, this silence became a scream that would echo through the history of the unexplained. It is a story that challenges our understanding of human displacement and the boundaries of our physical world. An entire village, home to over 2,000 people, vanished in a single night. They didn't just leave, they were erased. They left behind their food, their weapons, their clothing, and even the remains of their ancestors. Welcome to the Unknown Archive. Today, we trek into the frozen heart of the Canadian North to investigate the chilling mystery of Lake Anjikuni, a place where the living vanished and the dead were disturbed. Our story begins with Joe Labelle, a seasoned fur trapper who was no stranger to the hardships of the North. Labelle was a man of the woods, a man who respected the silence of the tundra and knew how to read the language of the snow. In November 1930, Labelle was trekking toward the shores of Lake Anjikuni. He was exhausted and looking forward to the hospitality of the Inuit village located there, a place known for its warmth and its bustling community. Labelle had visited this village many times. He knew the families, the hunters, and the playful sled dogs that usually heralded his arrival from miles away with their frantic barking. But as Labelle approached the settlement on that fateful November night, he felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the sub-zero temperatures. There was no barking. There was no smell of wood smoke in the air. Usually, the village was a hive of activity even in the darkest months. But tonight, it was wrapped in a stillness so profound it felt unnatural. The silence was heavy, pressing against his ears like a physical force. He entered the village perimeter and called out a greeting, expecting the flap of a tent to open or a friendly face to appear. Nothing moved. Only the shifting snow, driven by the wind, answered his call. Labelle began to move from tent to tent. The structures, made of skin and bone, were perfectly intact. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of a fire, and no indication that the village had been attacked by man or beast. He stepped into the first tent. Inside, a pot of caribou stew was hanging over the remains of a fire. The stew was frozen solid now, but it had clearly been cooking when the occupants left. In another dwelling, he found a sealskin garment laid out on a bench. A bone needle was still stuck in the fabric, as if the woman sewing it had just stepped out for a second and intended to return momentarily. This was the first major alarm bell for Labelle. In the Arctic, you never leave a fire or a task half-finished without a desperate reason. Life is too fragile to be careless with your resources. He searched for the men of the village. He checked the racks where the rifles were stored. To his absolute horror, he found that every single rifle was still in its place. For an Inuit hunter, leaving your rifle behind is a death sentence. It is the most valuable tool for survival. You do not walk out into the barren lands without your weapon, any more than you would walk out without your skin. Labelle's heart began to hammer against his ribs. He looked for footprints. He was a master tracker, capable of following a trail days after it was made. But the fresh snow around the tents was undisturbed. There were no tracks leading out of the village, not for one person, let alone 2,000. It was as if the entire population had been lifted straight into the sky, leaving their earthly possessions behind. Terror finally overcame the veteran trapper. He realized he was standing in a tomb that was not yet buried. He fled the village, running through the darkness until he reached a telegraph office miles away. He alerted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the legendary Mounties. His report was so bizarre that they initially doubted his sanity, but Labelle's reputation as a reliable witness preceded him. The RCMP launched an immediate investigation, dispatching officers to the remote lake. When they arrived, they confirmed everything Labelle had reported, but they found two more details that turned the mystery into a nightmare. Near the edge of the village, they found the sled dogs. There were dozens of them, still tied to the stunted trees. Every single dog had starved to death under several feet of snow. These dogs were a hunter's lifeblood, treated with respect and care. Why would an entire village of people who clearly had plenty of food in their stores allow their loyal companions to starve while tied up? It meant the people hadn't been gone for just a few hours. They had been gone for weeks. But if they had been gone for weeks, where were the tracks from when they first left? The second discovery was an act of ultimate blasphemy. The village cemetery where the ancestors had been laid to rest in the frozen earth had been disturbed. The graves had been emptied. The ground, which was frozen as hard as iron, had been dug up with precision. The bodies were gone. No animal could have dug through that permafrost, and no Inuit would ever disturb the resting place of their kin. It was a violation of their most sacred laws. Who or what would want the bodies of the dead? As the Mounties continued their search, they encountered other trappers in the region. A man named Armand Laurent and his two sons reported something strange they had seen in the sky. They described a large, glowing, cylindrical object that changed shape before their eyes. They watched as it moved silently through the air toward the direction of Lake Anjikuni. This report added a layer of modern mystery to an ancient land. Could the lights in the sky be connected to the empty tents and the empty graves? The story of Lake Anjikuni eventually reached the press. Journalist Frank Edwards published the account, and it became an international sensation, sparking debates about mass abductions and supernatural forces. Skeptics and government officials were quick to push back. The RCMP eventually issued a statement claiming the story was an exaggeration, or that the village was much smaller than Labelle claimed. They suggested the village might have only had 30 people, not 2,000. But even if it were only 30, the question remains: where did 30 people go without their guns, their dogs, or their boots? In the Unknown Archive, we look at the official denials as much as the evidence. Records from the period are confusing, and many files regarding the incident remain classified or lost in the archives. Why would the authorities want to downplay the event? Was there a fear of mass panic? Or was there something they were trying to hide about the Northern Territories? Some theories suggest a mass panic event, perhaps triggered by a natural phenomenon. But panic leaves footprints. Panic leaves a trail of dropped items and chaotic movements. Anjikuni was silent and orderly. Another theory focuses on infrasound, the same silent killer suspected in the Dyatlov Pass incident. Could the wind over the frozen lake have created a frequency that triggered a primal urge to flee? If the villagers were driven mad by sound, they might have walked onto the lake ice and fallen through. But Anjikuni was frozen solid enough to support a truck. No bodies were ever found beneath the ice. The theft of the dead remains the most chilling detail. In many cultures, stealing the dead is a way to harness their power or to erase a people's history entirely. Inuit mythology speaks of the kupua, ancient spirits that can take human form. Some believe the villagers encountered a force that didn't just kill them, but claimed their souls. Then there is the time slip theory. Did a localized tear in the fabric of space-time open up on the shores of the lake? This would explain the cooking food and the lack of tracks. They didn't walk away from our world. Our world simply moved away from them. They were trapped in a pocket of time, leaving behind only the items that weren't synchronized with the event. The glowing cylinder seen by Armand Laurent points toward an extraterrestrial explanation. Mass abductions are a common theme in UFO lore, but rarely on this scale. If a craft did descend on the village, why take the dogs? Why take the bodies of the dead? Perhaps the collectors were interested in every aspect of the community's existence. Joe Labelle never recovered from what he saw. He spent the rest of his life haunted by the image of the sewing needle and the frozen stew. He knew he had stepped into a place where the rules of man had been suspended. The village was never resettled. Other Inuit groups avoided the area for decades, claiming the ground was unhappy, and that the air over Lake Anjikuni carried the taste of copper. Even today, bush pilots flying over the region report strange malfunctions in their instruments. Compasses spin wildly, and radios pick up static that sounds like whispering voices. The Canadian government's attempt to bury the story only made it grow. By calling it a legend, they ensured that researchers would keep digging for the truth. Was Joe Labelle a liar? It seems unlikely. A man of his experience had nothing to gain from such a story and everything to lose, including his reputation. We have to consider the possibility of a secret military experiment. In 1930, the North was a perfect testing ground for weapons or psychological tactics away from prying eyes. But what kind of weapon can make 2,000 people disappear without a sound? What kind of technology could empty graves in the middle of a blizzard? The Lake Anjikuni mystery is a cold case in every sense of the word. It is a story frozen in time, waiting for a piece of evidence that may never wash ashore. It forces us to look at the map of our world and realize how many blank spots still exist. We think we have conquered the wilderness, but the wilderness still has the power to swallow us whole. When we compare this to other mass disappearances, like the Roanoke colony or the Mary Celeste, Anjikuni stands out because of the domesticity of the scene. At Roanoke, the word Croatoan was carved into a post. At Anjikuni, there was no message. There was only the unfinished work of a Tuesday afternoon. The starved dogs are a reminder of the cruelty of the event. It wasn't just a disappearance, it was an abandonment. Whatever took the people didn't care about the lives left behind. Some modern researchers suggest a volcanic gas leak might have killed the villagers, and their bodies were later scavenged. But this doesn't explain the missing rifles or the empty graves, and it certainly does not explain why a trapper wouldn't find a single body if they had all died where they stood. Every winter, the ice of Lake Anjikuni thickens, and the wind howls across the ruins of the old village site. The tents are gone now, rotted away by time and the elements. But the story remains. It is passed down through the oral traditions of the North, a cautionary tale about the things that dwell in the white dark. Do not go to the lake of the dead, the elders say. They know that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be avoided. In the Unknown Archive, we analyze the reports of the 1930s with a modern lens, but the terror remains the same. If such an event could happen then, could it happen now? In our world of satellite tracking and constant connectivity, could a community still vanish? The answer is a haunting yes. The world is much larger and more mysterious than we like to admit in our brightly lit cities. Joe Labelle died with the secret of Anjikuni still burning in his mind. He was the last person to see the village as it was, a place of life that became a place of void. The empty graves remain the most enigmatic part of the puzzle. They suggest that the disappearance was not just of the living, but of the entire lineage of the village. It was a total erasure. A community's past, present, and future were all taken in a single, silent event. As we look back on the files of the RCMP, we see a pattern of confusion. The changing numbers, the dismissed testimonies, the closed records. It is the behavior of an organization that encountered something it could not explain and decided that silence was the safest policy. Lake Anjikuni is a silent witness. It has seen the lights in the sky and the departure of its people. It keeps its secrets beneath the ice. If you ever find yourself in the Canadian wilderness, far from the lights of civilization, be careful of the silence. If you find a village where the fires are cold but the food is still on the table, do not stay. Do not look for tracks. Turn back and run, just as Joe Labelle did. Some things are not meant for human eyes. The mystery of the vanished village remains one of the most significant entries in our archive of the unknown. Thank you for joining us at the Unknown Archive. What do you think happened at Lake Anjikuni? Let us know in the comments. And as always, keep your eyes on the horizon.